Following the release of Kendrick Lamar's Response, we are going to now pivot and listen to what some other people have to say about it. And we're going to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation about the music industry itself in 2024. Because the music industry, has been around for decades. It's been one of the most influential aspects of the media culture, of American culture. A lot of American music that has been made and created in this country is now worldwide, and we're more connected to the entire world more than ever before, and that's changed since the music industry's inception decades ago. And in 2024, things are changing at a very fast pace. With the introduction and growth of platforms such as TikTok in the last few years and other forms of social media sharing platforms, music has been changing. Some argue for the better and some argue for the worse. I was very lucky to have a friend of mine, friend of the show, Dylan, reach out to share some of his thoughts on the music industry. So we're going to hear what he has to say. Shout out to Dylan. I appreciate him coming on today. Make sure you check out the description of today's episode. I'm going to be putting links to some of Dylan's work down there. I wanted to ask him what his thoughts on modern rap beefs were. I mean, anybody who's familiar with hip hop and rap know that diss tracks and quote unquote rapping to be the best rapper have been a part of the genre since the very beginning. For those who don't know, hip hop began in New York. Before rapping was ever a thing, it was just the instrumentation and sampling and just the creation of hip hop style of dance and instrumental music. It's been a very competitive genre of music since its inception. That's one of the things that separates it from other genres of music. Country music isn't a competitive genre. Rock music isn't a competitive genre. Sure, you can have, you want to argue who's the best guitarist, who's the best bassist, the best singer. But hip-hop, it was the genre that people treated like basketball, like football, where it wasn't just about art, but it was also about skill. It's grown to be a lot more than that, and it hasn't always been just that, but that's one of the main aspects of it, and that's one of the aspects of it that I love personally. In the modern era, hip-hop is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just in the United States anymore, it's global. I wanted to ask Dylan what his thoughts on modern rap beef in that regard were.
So, my thoughts on modern rap beef or diss tracks and kind of the competitiveness of hip-hop to begin with. Of course, rap has always seemed to be competitive, at least as far as, we've grown up since, the 2000s and on. That's 20 years into hip-hop history, give or take, already, just by the time we were born. And diss tracks and beef and that kind of, like I said, competitiveness was already something that was entrenched in rap history by that point. And of course, battle rap is something that is super popular still, even now. It's kind of like its own subgenre in itself, the way people do a cappella battles. I know people from Philly, you could argue or think Meek Mill, and I think what's her name? Tierra Whack, at least are two Philly artists who kind of grew up rapping on, on the corners, outside with a bunch of people around them. Maybe it wasn't necessarily battle rap, but at least like kind of that communal braggadocio or that communal kind of experience of seeing what other people are made of and critiquing it, is definitely something that's probably intrinsic to hip-hop music. I don't think that all hip-hop music has to be, antagonistic. I think there's a lot of great rap music that is very positive and very, non-confrontational. But it's interesting now that rap is probably the most listened to genre, at least in America, for our age group, between, you could probably even say down to like teenage years, through to your early 30s. Rap is probably one of the most popular genres, if not the most listened to genre in that age group. So it's gone pretty pop, it's gone pretty mainstream, and so maybe a lot of the edges have been kind of shaved off, at least on the most listened to, the most streamed kind of artists. The most palatable artist is probably a better way to put that, but there's still a lot of artists doing really cool stuff in the underground and hip hop heads know about, that still have that kind of old school energy. I know Griselda is pretty popular at this point, but people doing things like that where it still has that kind of heritage in it that you can just kind of see in the DNA when you listen to one of their songs.
You know, he makes some interesting points there. This podcast is filmed, you know, in the suburbs of Philadelphia. We've grown up very close to one of the most, what's the right word here? One of the most vital and important hubs of contribution to the hip-hop genre. The city of Philadelphia doesn't need much explanation when it comes to the art it's provided, and not just, you know, hip-hop and rap, but also blues and rock and movies, television. The city is a cultural hub, so to speak. We also have a lot of the best sports teams, but we're not going to get into that right now. Maybe another day. But I'm glad that he brought up Tierra Whack and Meek Mill, because those are two very profound artists that have rose to, you know, stadium status. I agree with him that the braggadocio and aggressive nature of hip-hop has always been there, you know, rapping to be the best rapper. But again, it's not the only thing that makes the genre so appealing, especially to younger age groups right now, because, as he stated, it's not as narrow as it once was. And again, it wasn't always just rapping to be the best rapper. That wasn't what the genre itself was. It was a lot more than that. It was counterculture. It was... Maybe we could do another episode on the history of hip-hop. I feel like Dylan would have a lot to say about that. But as far as this goes, like, the genre itself has since become something a lot bigger. I like that he noted that battle rap itself has something that's always been, you know, very popular in hip-hop and rap. It still is very popular, but it's sort of like a subgenre now. It's in the same vein as other subgenres as well. I feel like Dylan's answer here really highlights how, like, the roots of hip-hop have since grown from just, like... I don't know if this is going to be, like, the worst analogy ever or not, but I think it kind of illustrates the points. But it's, you know, like, when a tree first starts growing, the roots aren't as expansive as, like, the entire forest, you know. But, like, hip-hop started out as just, like, you know, a small plant, but now it's got roots extending across the whole forest, you know what I mean? I might have to cut that out. I don't know. I also asked him how he feels specifically about the Drake and Kendrick beef, you know, with J. Cole included a little bit because he was still a part of it. I wanted to ask him how far he thinks it'll go. What does it mean for the future of hip-hop? I also asked him if there are any new artists he thinks that are, quote-unquote, worthy to pass the torch to. I wanted to ask him that because Drake, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, there's a reason why J. Cole came out and said that they were the big three of hip-hop. They are massive artists. They are huge. They are global. You can hear any of those three artists no matter where you go. They go on tours that go overseas into different continents, into different cultures, different parts of the world. Are there new artists in the hip-hop game right now that are as huge or are on track to be just as huge?
Well, you know, for me, I think I was talking to somebody recently about all the Kendrick Cole and Drake stuff, and to me, it kind of feels like popcorn movies to me at this point. As I mentioned before, hip-hop is probably the most popular genre with people our age. It's you know, incredibly profitable at this point, more profitable than it's ever been for someone to get into hip-hop, and that's something that you can't always say for you know, rappers from the 80s and 90s who were great and were massive successes, but there were so many more people who did it without ever thinking that they could ever reach the heights of like a LL Cool J or like a Run DMC. But now more than ever, there's space for artists to kind of go into the atmosphere of popular music and become kind of hip hop royalty or modern music royalty. And in that way, even artists like you know, Post Malone or something, someone who came up in hip hop music and then sidestepped kind of into something else, almost entirely more pop or something more country or something that isn't inherently or, you know, known for being hip hop or whatever you would say, hardcore hip hop. And it's interesting to see, you know, I mean, without Drake and there probably wouldn't be so many pop influence kind of rap music. Most definitely, you know, I mean, him and Kanye probably in particular, two rappers who can really make great and write great verses in just pure rap, but then also kind of have a really strong pop appeal. So when I think about artists like Drake, Cole, and Kendrick being kind of a big three, I don't really listen to them as much as as a lot of other maybe more casual hip hop fans. I don't want to say casual, I guess, but I think I'm so deep into underground music and alternative music, at least in raps in particular, that I'm often looking for something that is way more something that's way more kind of DIY, I guess, and has that kind of punk energy that a lot of hip hop has, or at least a lot of hip hop had, coming up in kind of that Chief Keef era when we were in middle school, and even before. There's artists in the Bling era in the 2000s that kind of had their own particular style, where I feel like Drake, Cole, and Kendrick make like stadium hip hop, if that makes sense. Maybe not stadium hip hop in the sense that they're mixing and mastering everything to be played in that scenario for live performance, but stadium hip hop in that they're so popular that when they make music, for as artistic and as deep as it can be, especially with Kendrick in particular, it still has to appeal to a mass audience, whereas a lot of the artists I listen to, I feel like, make music more for themselves, it feels like. But of course they're not making the same money. They haven't, maybe made as much of a career for themselves just yet. And I'm sure if they did have the success that Kendrick, Drake, and Cole did, it would not be for, it would be because they wanted to be there, because they sacrificed a piece of their art probably to be there, because not everyone wants to listen to Chief Keef. Not everyone wants to listen to, Surf Gang all the time. But there's probably more people rapping than ever, kind of like what I said earlier. So if there were to be someone to pass the torch to, for the next king of hip hop role, I don't really know if that's so much a thing anymore. But I'm not sure if I have the authority to say that, because I'm not someone who kind of listens to that caliber of rapper anymore.
Shout out to Chief Keef. He said it perfectly there. I don't really think it's a thing anymore that there's like the quote unquote king of hip hop, because hip hop isn't just a narrow genre. It's a very broad, diverse. It's the entire forest. It's the entire Amazon rainforest. So I mean, when you're talking about the kings of hip hop, even when this whole beef started in the first place with, the big three, quote unquote, it's just the big three of what? It's a bit of a confusing statement to make, just because, you could be the big three of, which aspect of hip hop. It's very commercial. It's very popular. It's a huge business, first and foremost. It's not just, music. It's business. It's money. A lot of this is, like you said, it's like popcorn. It's like entertainment. It's designed to be entertainment. I do like the diss tracks that are coming out. I do like, the fun that's being had. However, it doesn't feel like they're truly trying to go at each other, if you know what I mean. It makes sense when the two artists actually do not like each other. However, you can't really say the same for Kendrick and Drake as far as the public knows, you know what I mean? They're two massive musicians who garner a lot of money. I don't even need to pull up the amount of money that gets pulled in by a Drake tour. So while this, beef that's going on could be built upon some really, dense feelings that the artists have towards each other, it could just as easily be a manufactured thing. And again, I want to say, check out all the artists that Dylan is name dropping here. It's very good to go searching for those other artists that you may not be expecting they have anything to offer you. There's a lot of underground artists, especially in the Philadelphia area, such as Anthony C, just to name one of my favorites. There's a lot of artists out there that have a lot to offer that really don't get the attention that, these massive $1 million, multi-million dollar, almost $1 billion artists, they take up all the spotlight, and they deserve that. But there's a lot that just goes under the radar. Again, I wanted to talk to Dylan about the era of TikTok and what people have described as commodified music and art. I wanted to know his thoughts on the modern music industry.
I think the streaming era of music is good for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is there's more space and more kind of flexibility for artists to make money. There's probably more individual people making money off their music than ever before. And also, as a consumer, you don't have to go to a record store anymore and take a gamble on a CD and not like all the tracks. And maybe, the way we consume that kind of album, is better in a lot of ways, because we're like spending money on this one thing and we want to listen to it top to bottom multiple times and try and get our money's worth out of it and pick out, what we really love about it. Whereas, now you have access to nearly every publicly released, or every big release, and even a lot of small alternative releases. People can publish their own music on Spotify. Now that we have that all at our fingertips, we have this playlist culture where people aren't taking as much thought into the sequencing of an album, or the or kind of the care into caring about a cohesive amount of tracks. It's more like, let's release singles over this period of time. Let's figure out what's the most streamable. Let's put those in a certain place, and let's influence the way we even make our art entirely to fit a kind of streaming era model. And that I don't really love. On top of that, there isn't really an underground anymore, it feels like at times, because even the most alternative or most underground kind of people or artists, once they kind of pick up some sort of traction, alternative people and alternative culture has kind of become its own mainstream culture. So there's so many subcultures that can be picked up by social media that there isn't really there's no prerequisites to kind of get into music anymore, which again is good and bad. But you don't have to go anywhere and talk to anybody and learn about people and see people live anymore. You can kind of just sit back and consume as much as you want to consume, and act online like you're an expert in something, instead of really immersing yourself in a culture or in a subgenre of rap or music in general, or art in general. It's kind of, being cool and being edgy or being alternative is kind of its own tribe now, instead of being sort of, what you could say is a badge of honor.
Shout out to Reddit. I agree that there's a lot that's good about the streaming era, specifically with, as he said, you don't have to go to a store anymore and gamble on a record that you may or may not even like. I remember when my parents were growing up, they would tell us about, when they spent money on a record or a CD or even a tape, that, they got their money's worth and they tried their best to enjoy everything. Nowadays, when we throw on a project, we won't even listen to an entire project. Someone may release a project and you can listen to the first, 30 seconds, decide whether or not you like it, and then skip to the next one. You can skip over entire songs. You can start wherever you want in the project. You can start halfway through the album. You can start wherever you want in the project, and you don't even have to listen to it all. And you can only keep, what you like and discard what you don't like. I do think that's a good thing about the streaming and TikTok era of what we're living through right now. And everybody's going to have a different taste too. You're going to like some things, you're going to dislike some things that other people may love. Something you may like may be someone else's least favorite song or something like that. It's very easy to identify, people with similar interests based on, like you said, the playlist culture. I wanted to ask him if he thought that events such as this, the Drake and Kendrick beef, takes the spotlight away from artists that are trying to gain traction in the music industry. We already touched on that a little bit, but I also wanted to ask him what he thought could be done to highlight smaller underground artists in the industry so that they could succeed as well.
I do think, for as much as I said, I have an issue with, there not really being gatekeeping anymore in the underground or an alternative culture, that's kind of become its own mainstream culture in a way that everyone has access to and no one, kind of has to work for anymore. There are a lot of people online who highlight underground artists, and there are Twitter pages and Reddit pages and places where you can go to kind of get a scoop on those underground and smaller artists. And that's great. and you know, it's all I really know. So I still go on Twitter all the time or SoundCloud and kind of find artists, or at least rappers in particular, that I really, really enjoy, and then I tell all my friends about it. And I think, for as much as I'm the guy sometimes who has the weird music taste or listens to the stuff that no one else wants to listen to, like I can remember listening to Yeat early, I can remember listening to Young Thug early, and not that any of my friends are super duper huge, you know, Yeat fans, but or even like Lucky in particular, I can see online is pretty popular relatively in the underground. If you know, like I said, if that even really exists anymore, if there even is an underground. You know, all those artists are now have at least some sort of mainstream appeal, and there's a space for them, and I think that's really cool. But I think artists need to be paid better, of course. And while there's more ways to monetize yourself than ever, which is a good and a bad thing as well, I think that, you know, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, whatever you use, could definitely be doing a better job to support smaller artists and get them into their, you know, into deals that aren't cannibalistic or don't cause them to kind of sacrifice their art for the dollar, you know. But surely there's sacrifices to be made. You know, I love JPEG Mafia, I love Harto Falayan specifically. I think he's amazing, but they're the kind of artists that I feel like don't do self-promotion in the way that some other artists do, and kind of create a groundswell of people who really enjoy them, or even like a cult following kind of first. And that's something that can still be done. And you know, I don't have the answers to how to blow up if you're an underground artist, but I do think that there's plenty of ways to find underground artists now, and you just have to look for it, basically.
Well, I guess that is the question now, isn't it? How do you blow up? And if you listen to the open mic, I'm going to tell you just how to do that. I'm just kidding. I don't know anything. But what I do know is that Dylan is spitting facts. Thank you very much, Dylan, for providing your thoughts and insights on this. I really appreciate everything you had to share with us today. I agree entirely with that. I do believe that platforms such as Spotify and Tidal and SoundCloud and Apple Music, Bandcamp is the greatest of all time, in my opinion. I think they make it the easiest for underground, unsigned artists to share their music in a way that gives back to the artists themselves. Shout out to Bandcamp, shout out to Gucci Mane, shout out to Yeat, shout out to Lucky. Those platforms have made it so easy for independent artists who don't have the resources to, you know, get a record deal, just like you had to, you know, before the streaming era was even a thing. It makes it easy for these artists to get put on. That's something that really can't be substituted for anything else. That's something that's an essential part to the music industry going forward. That's what the music industry needs. Without it, it would be very easy for music to just fizzle out without that, you know, lifeline to independent artists. And I also agree with them that there's a lot more that can be done to help these artists as well. But it's also difficult when there's so many artists too that are just flooding these platforms. It's very hard to, it's like finding the needle in the haystack. It's like finding the diamond in the rough, because you have to find someone who matches your taste. You have to find someone that, even in just the hip hop sense, you got to find someone whose voice you like, whose approaches rap in a style that you can appreciate, someone whose production you can vibe out to, someone who has a message you can relate to. Are you even looking for a message in the first place? Are you just looking for something to relax to party to? There's so much going on here, and it's so difficult to find that artist that you're looking for. But it's also, I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because while it's so difficult to find those diamonds in the rough, it's also just as easy to find so many potential artists. You're not going to love every single artist you listen to, you know, right off the bat. You can always have, and even with the use of artificial intelligence curates playlists for you. And even then, influencers that you may follow also, or artists you may like, may also be curating playlists for you to listen to that may put you onto something that you didn't even expect in the first place. So again, there's a lot to talk about here. There's still so much to go into, but I want to wrap things up a little bit. Thank you so much, Dylan, for coming on the show. Again, be sure to check out all the links in the description so you can check out Dylan's work. He's a very talented artist. One more time, thank you, Dylan, for coming on the show. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you got something out of it today. I'm really happy with what we got going on here. Shout out to Philadelphia, too. My name is Nick Bruno. Thank you very much for listening to the open mic today, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.